So yeah, thank you again so much for your time and for being interested to have this conversation. From the first time I came across your story, I was so fascinated by it, and I so much wanted to, to be able to have a conversation with you about yourself, about the experiences that you had, and obviously how they affected you, essentially, because obviously we're talking about something that not many people have experienced, So why don't you start by telling me a bit about yourself, your upbringing, your personality, and essentially, how did you come to that significant date for all the world, and obviously the one that you've experienced in such a manner?
Well, so when I was born 2 months early,
Mm-hmm.
and what medical science wasn't ready to accept was that if they take a child who was born premature and put them in an incubator with a pure oxygen environment, that can cause blindness. Someone had discovered that, but medical science wasn't ready to accept it.
Mm-hmm.
So anyway, I was put in an incubator and I was given a pure oxygen environment. And 4 months after I was born, it was discovered that I was blind. And the doctors told my parents that they should send me off to a home because no blind child could ever grow up to be able to contribute or do anything in the world. And a blind child would only mess up the love they have for their other children who can see. My parents said, "You're wrong. Of course he can grow up to do anything he wants, and we're going to give him that opportunity." And I grew up with that attitude throughout my whole life.
Mm-hmm.
So I was born in Chicago. We lived there for 5 years, and then we moved to California.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've been there, well, other than traveling and doing some things out of state, but most of my life has been in California. And I grew up believing that I could do whatever I chose to do, and did. So after college, I did some work and worked with the National Federation of the Blind and a guy named Ray Kurzweil, who's a very famous now futurist and inventor. And Ray had developed the first technology that could allow a machine to read any printed, typed, or combination of printed and typed material. He developed what's called omnifont optical character recognition.
Wow.
And so Ray and the Federation developed a program because Ray wanted the first application for his machine to be making it possible for blind people to read print. So we did that, and I was hired to coordinate a lot of the efforts of that. Then I went to work for Ray, and I did that for a little while and doing human factors studies, but then later was asked to go into sales and sell a commercial version of his product, which I did for a while. And then when Xerox bought the company, I and all the other salespeople were laid off. And the result of that was that I had to go look for another job, and I eventually had to start my own company just to find a job, because the unemployment rate among employable blind people in this country and throughout the world is extremely high. And it's not that blind people can't work, assuming they learn the skills that they need to, but it's more an issue of people believing that blind people can't work because they believe that if you can't see, you can't do anything.
Yeah.
And unfortunately, the professionals in the field tend to not necessarily do a lot to address that. But anyway, the bottom line is that I started my own company, and then later I went back into the workforce. And that eventually led me to needing to relocate to New York, or to the New Jersey, New York area. And by that time I was married, my wife, who was in a wheelchair her whole life, and I moved to New Jersey, and I worked in New York City. And in 1999, I was hired by a company to open an office for them in New York City. And I did in August of 2000. And we opened it on the 78th floor of Tower 1 of the World Trade Center because we were able to get office space and get it inexpensively at the time. So we opened the office, and then a year later, one of our major reseller distributor partners asked if we would do some work teaching their resellers how to sell our products so that they could sell more of them.
Mm-hmm.
We agreed to do that, and we chose the day of September 11th, 2001 to do the seminars. And of course, September 11th, we were getting ready for the seminars when the buildings were attacked, and it kind of went from there.
Wow. Before, obviously moving to that story on its own, I'm really curious to double down on some of the moments that you've already mentioned. Firstly, you've said that, since you've been very young, you've always believed in doing whatever you wanted. What was the thing that you were aspired and passionate to do as a young child?
I had always thought I wanted to be a teacher. And so when I was in college, I was getting a degree in scientific field. I have a master's degree in physics, but I also got a secondary teaching credential because I wanted to teach. Mm-hmm. And I actually thought I would teach in college. But then the Kurzweil job came up, so that caused things to change. But as I've realized, I've always been a teacher. Mm-hmm. And I teach people regularly about disabilities, about blindness, about me. And so I'm teaching now, even today, although it's not in the same way that I otherwise would have.
Yeah. That's amazing. And by the way, the person you've mentioned, Ray, is that the person who invented the OCR, as you've mentioned it? This is the technology that the world is using in AI in every sphere of life right now?
Yeah, he didn't develop OCR, but he developed Omnifont OCR. That is, He developed the technology that meant that computers and technology could read any type style or any collection of type styles or print styles on a page.
Wow.
Before Ray, you had to reprogram your computer every time you wanted to read a page that had more than one type style. You had to reprogram the computer to read each type style. Ray changed that.
Wow. That's a monumental invention, I'd say. That's amazing. Yeah. Wow.